We're junkies who get high on the drug called the feminine. This deep sense of love, and for a moment, a little boy feels like a man. What happens when a man suppresses that aspect? He loses his power. He loses his cock and balls. When I speak of the divine feminine, I'm speaking of a woman who comes from love. She doesn't come from criticism or you are not yet that ideal that I need you to be, because what it creates is this wounded dynamic. You're still not enough. I noticed there was so much shame inside me that I cannot really look the man I am in the eyes. So I started to ask the deeper question, what is the real work I need to do here? And that's when it dawned on me that to become spiritual is to become a person of integrity. We're not looking for a solution. We're looking for spiritual evolution. I don't fully understand what it is, but let me get present. And maybe there is even an element of discomfort when we as men don't know. We want to know, we want to fix, we want to change. Who are we when we don't know?
Creating concrete visions of a macrocosmic prism with a brilliant optimism.
Meine Freunde, willkommen zurück bei The Chainless Life, deinem Podcast für Bildung, die befreit. Hier spricht wie immer dein Host Misha und gemeinsam tauchen wir heute wieder in eine Experten-Episode ein. Mal wieder in der englischen Sprache, weil ich hier einen jungen Mann mitgebracht habe, der wirklich weiß, wovon er spricht. Und ich habe ihn tatsächlich auch aus sehr egoistischen Gründen eingeladen, einfach weil mich seine Arbeitsweise interessiert hat, weil wir tatsächlich über sehr viele ähnliche Sachen sprechen. Lorin Krenn spricht leidenschaftlich über Polarität in Beziehungen, das heißt die Dynamik zwischen dem Femininen und dem Maskulinen und damit auch zwischen der Mann-Frau-Dynamik. Und das Ganze macht er eben auch nicht erst seit gestern, sondern schon seit Jahren, ist selbst auch in einer glücklichen monogamen Beziehung. Und deswegen wollte ich einfach mal so ein bisschen wissen, wie spricht er denn über das Thema Polarität? Weil seine Zielgruppe sind tatsächlich mehr Frauen und bei mir hören hier immer noch aktuell 75% Männer zu. Deswegen einfach mal so auch einen Austausch zu haben mit einem Mann, der dieses Wissen auch verkörpert, anwendet und auch weitergibt. Und dadurch konnte ich für mich persönlich heute sehr viel lernen und bin mir sicher, dass auch du etwas lernen wirst. Vor allem dann, wenn du ein Mann bist, der vielleicht gerade in einer Phase ist, wo er noch nicht so richtig weiß, wie das ganze Thema Frau jetzt in sein Leben passt. Muss ich jetzt eine Frau suchen? Muss ich sie jetzt anziehen? Muss ich zuerst zu dem Mann werden, der diese Frau verdient? Oder vielleicht bist du gerade in einer Beziehung, fühlst dich gefangen, fühlst dich nicht so wirklich bei dir. Genau dann kannst du hier zuhören und vor allem auch alle Frauen hier. Heute geht es auch mal wirklich richtig stark um euch. Wie könnt ihr auch euren Traumpartner in euer Leben ziehen? Was sind auch Sachen, die eine Frau vorher für sich zuerst mal klarstellen muss, machen muss, um dann auch wirklich bereit zu sein für eine Beziehung? Ein wunderschönes Gespräch, was dich jetzt hier erwartet und deswegen sage ich viel Spaß, viele Learnings und gute Unterhaltung mit Lorin Krenn. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend was sending me one of your posts. And it reminded me of my time when I wasn't in biggest service myself, when I was in the quote-unquote bad guy role in my life. I'm going to read the quote real quick. A woman is often torn between the nice guy and the bad boy until she meets the spiritual warrior, a man of vision, soul, and unapologetic fire. He doesn't try to be attractive. He's magnetic because he lives in truth. So, reading this quote coming from you, I think a really interesting question would be to just hear from your own evolution from being a bad guy or maybe a good guy to your own spiritual warrior journey. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, a powerful start. I believe this evolution, I'm going to use parallels of my own journey, but this evolution applies almost to every man, I believe, in some shape or form. It's this journey of, we can call it the me consciousness, where it's all about me. It's about that kind of bad boy behavior. A woman is a trophy. The feminine is used. It's all about external status. It's all about validation. And many men embody this and many men awaken from this. The question is, do the men who awaken from this and become spiritual become truly embodied. Yes, in a way, there is an evolutionary step at a spiritual, at an energetic level that occurs. But at the same time, there is so much room for bypassing. So essentially, this evolution that we often see is, for instance, from bad boy to people pleaser, right? So, and essentially what happens here, to make this really practical for the listeners, is that bad boy is told these traits that you have, they're toxic. So they try to go into spiritual teachings and it's all about oneness and, live with an open heart and be vulnerable, but it often comes at the expense of our primal nature as men, that primal masculine power. And it's no man's fault that we have received this conditioning, because men have caused a lot of pain in this world. It is true. So by nature, kind of subconsciously, we have this idea that, okay, that means we must reject it. But I believe wholeness as a man and true evolution is that integration of both. To be able to access our anger, our boundaries, our sword of truth, to protect our truth, to be ready to fight if absolutely and truly necessary, and at the same time to live with an open heart and to be integrated. And to use the parallel of my own journey, I was in that kind of bad boy asshole phase in my own life, and then I went into spirituality. And you can read many spiritual books, and you can and believe you are far in your journey if you have a experience where you're present for the first time in your life and you experience a moment of deeper connection with the divine, or whatever we want to call it. But I realized that I was bypassing the work of truly being in integrity. Truly, I realized that I was doing the spiritual work, but I wasn't in integrity with the feminine. So it wasn't really embodied. I was still in this kind of bad boy energy, which ultimately is a form of spiritual bypassing. And the integration is when we can reclaim ourselves as men fully, and at the same time live with an open heart and no longer embody the energy of using the feminine, or it's all about me. Now, there's so much more to that, but that's kind of a broader answer to this question.
What was the trigger for you to finally look deeper in your own journey? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's a great question. The trigger for me was that I looked in the mirror and I realized that I cannot really look the man I am in the eyes. I noticed there was so much shame inside me. So I started to ask the deeper question, what is the real work I need to do here? And that's when it dawned on me that to become spiritual is to become a person of integrity. And that there's no taker energy or use energy or needing the feminine for validation, for approval, because that's a taking, that's the shadow, that's the ego inside us. And that work, that's the embodied work. It's the hardest work. It's the work where you're on your knees and you realize, wow, this is not just a quick breathwork session. This is not just a quick meditation. This is again and again and again choosing what is hardest. But the hard path is the only path, I believe.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of my own path. You were talking about the taker energy. I would call it for myself the savior energy. Because there is an evolution from the quote-unquote bad guy, quote-unquote fuckboy, to the spiritual fuckboy.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
That's at least, I have a residency on Koh Phangan, so this is like the capital of spiritual fuckboyism. And there is a lifeline to it too, because as a spiritual fuckboy, you really integrate a lot of the knowledge. You can even call it like almost like you get skilled in so many different things, and emotional maturity and like sexual maturity. And then you think, oh, I'm actually doing something good. And you just said also before that man created so much pain in the past, obviously through conquering the world, through all the crazy shit we did. But there is also this like acknowledgement that has to come at some point that what I'm doing here is I'm consuming rather than actually like fully giving to the feminine. I think that's actually, for me, was the hardest one where I still feel, also with your content, it's probably not easy to teach a man that is in that phase that he does anything wrong. Like you can like try to remind them, but what would be your number one, maybe also actionable advice for a man that is in that phase where he is enjoying the fruits of his work and has no real reason to look deeper?
Yeah. One powerful way to start and to make this practical is to look at how much of your life or how much of your identity is still around receiving validation from the feminine. Where is there still an element of, I feel more secure in my manhood if I get something from the feminine? And when we truly realize how that impacts us, we realize that that is not what it means to embody our, whatever we want to call it, divine masculine, sacred masculine. There is no wholeness in that sense. We're junkies. We're junkies who get high on the drug called the feminine. She has the ability, when we make love, to this radiance washes over us and this deep sense of love. And for a moment, a little boy feels like a man. But then what happens after the lovemaking? When there is a challenge, when he feels slightly rejected, that's what we need to look at. Do we still need that validation? Yes, we all need a sense of connection and acknowledgement. I'm not talking about abandoning basic human needs. We men need to feel safe too, and we need emotional connection. And we need some sense of being seen, of course, for who we are. I get that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the bad boy still needs something from the feminine. He acts like he doesn't, but he still needs something, right? Because if you put him alone in a room and remove all of that, the chasing and conquering, then what does he meet? He meets a wounded little boy inside. And the spiritual fuckboy, the same. Take that element away and suddenly, wow, the Pandora box opens. A door opens or a veil unlifts, and suddenly there is a confrontation with something that has been suppressed, with something that has been pushed aside. And when a man truly sees of how much his life is still oriented towards depending on the feminine to a certain degree, needing her validation to feel powerful, then he realizes, wow, this might just be the most or one of the most powerful aspects of the work to return to my true power. So to make it practical for everyone listening here, who do you become when you don't get that validation? What's happening then? What do we see? What would we see? What would Misha and I see in this moment if we were here in the moment observing it? And that's the powerful work, I say.
Beautifully said. It's a really good question. Let's turn it around for the women that are super crazy attracted to that. I would call it like dark masculine shadow sex. Like this, like, I just want to be taken. I just want to be ravished. I almost like certain women almost say like, I want to be used. You know, there's still like a part of them that acknowledges the fact that I actually want to be used. It's almost like we're consuming each other, especially on the quote unquote more spiritually mature levels where people are already somehow scratching the surface of shadow work. There's like this idea of like, oh, now I know my shadow. Now I can also indulge in it. And I'm still obviously there in an open question, an open dialogue with myself is like, maybe also to you, Lorin, that would be the second question maybe. Is there still space for the dark masculine or like for the dark sexual parts in your life as well?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, truly. And I believe that's so important for everyone listening here. The reason from my take why of course, there's an aspect of wounding here, a shadow from the feminine as well, around being attracted to that, often from father wounding, for instance. So, for instance, the father was emotionally unavailable. The father was absent, whether physically or emotionally. And now there is that sense of chemistry with a man who is very, very shut down, very numb, and doesn't treat her well, because that chemistry is actually trauma, but it's confused with love. It's the nervous system is seeking familiarity. This is familiar. Wow, I've got such a psychic pull. This is so intense. This is so strong. But what it really is the nervous system trying to find home. The nervous system, when we grow up, when it was all about chaos and pain and rejection, then it will look for home in relationships. But when that was home, then it will look for that familiar home of chaos and pain. And that's one aspect of this. And there is the other aspect which ties into what we already talked about before, which is around that many women have never experienced that integration in a man where, answering your second question, he's still able to embody that dark masculine energy or that primal masculine energy, that desire to thrust, that desire to ravish a woman deeply and wholeheartedly, but not from an unconscious place. Mm-hmm. From a place of, I own my sexual desire, I own this intensity, but I'm not disconnecting from the heart. So it doesn't come at the expense of heart connection. It comes with heart connection. It comes, wow, she feels safe in that moment, but it needs attunement. So the dark masculine energy or shadow you talked about is without attunement. It's kind of just satiating a more primal unconscious need. But there is still place, and there must be place for this. Because what's going to happen otherwise? A man will suppress that aspect.
Exactly.
What happens when a man suppresses that aspect? He loses his power. Quote unquote, if I can use harsh language, he loses his cock and balls in the process. He's no longer a man. He can no longer express his desire for his woman. That's not the model that I'm teaching, or the model that I'm teaching men, or I talk about and create practices about and have a framework about. It's integrating that and in service to love, in service to embodying our highest truth. And sexuality is important, and owning our sexual needs is important. So the last thing I'll say here is a woman needs to work on herself. If she's fully in that father wound, like entirely, she's not going to feel drawn to a man who is integrated just by nature, or mostly not. We don't want to generalize here, but usually not. But when she's doing that work and she meets that man who is integrated, then actually I'd say the attraction is even stronger and actually much deeper, because it's rooted in something truthful, something soulful.
Alright. Kurze Unterbrechung an dieser Stelle. Über das Thema Eifersucht habe ich tatsächlich vor ein paar Wochen eine Masterclass abgehalten, und zwar bei Chainless Intimacy. Das ist mein persönlicher Fachbereich in unserer Schule, Chainless University, die du heute noch kostenlos kennenlernen kannst. Und zwar kriegen die ersten 50 Leute, die sich jetzt über den Link in den Shownotes bei uns für die Chainless University anmelden, 14 Tage kostenlosen Zugang auf das gesamte Bildungspaket, inklusive auch den ganzen Live-Calls, damit du dich persönlich überzeugen kannst von dem, was wir hier gebaut haben, einer Plattform, einer Community und einem Team von Experten, die dir helfen werden, dich nicht nur innerlich zu befreien, sondern auch im Außen die ganzen Themen, die dich vielleicht auch noch blockieren, wirklich mal anzuschauen, dich finanziell unabhängig zu machen, dich auch ortsunabhängig aufzustellen, sofern du merkst, dass es dich vielleicht in Deutschland ein bisschen zu stark deprimiert, und vor allem auch dein Leben so zu meistern, dass du nicht lebst, um zu arbeiten, sondern arbeitest, um auch ein bisschen zu leben. Und das ist für uns die größte Mission seit 6 Jahren. Deswegen machen wir hier diesen kostenlosen Content. Und deswegen nutzt diese Chance jetzt und hol dir einen von diesen 50 kostenlosen Zugängen und schau dir dann auch gerne den Workshop zu Eifersucht an und schau dir auch gerne meinen Intimacy-Kurs an, weil dort gebe ich all das weiter, was ich selbst über die letzten Jahre in diesem Bereich von meinen Lehrern und auch vielen Beziehungen gelernt habe. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören, und jetzt geht's weiter mit der Folge. How would you talk about jealousy in that context? Like, what is your personal relationship with jealousy, maybe also in your relationship? Because from my own experience, it is definitely something that can trigger positive as negative emotions and consequences. It can also be incorporated very skillfully and playfully. But what I've seen is that most people in that sacred union world, like the people who call themselves a sacred union, they're usually also, in my opinion, trying to avoid it more rather than confront it. So I'm just curious where this goes into your, how do you see that part?
Yeah. I mean, jealousy can turn into possessiveness. There can be an element of, I want to own this person. I want to possess this person. Like it's a holding on, it's a controlling element. And I believe that's what you're referring to, that controlling element and energy. And we can all agree here, whatever relationship we're in, whether someone is polyamorous or I'm deeply in a monogamous marriage, highly committed in a monogamous sense, but whatever model people are in, I have no judgment of that. We can all agree that control is the opposite of love. It's like the flower of love, and we try to control it. It's plugging its root. So that is not sacred union, trying to possess and own the other person. Jealousy is something that we have to work through, because jealousy is usually, I'd say, points to a need to be in control, and also to a fear. And what fear? A fear of maybe the other person betraying them, a fear of losing that person. What can that be tied to? Maybe I'm not good enough. I need to control, because if I don't control, then they are gonna leave me. What's that? An abandonment wound. That's not love. That's wounding ultimately. And at the same time, like you said, there is an element where there is that it can be incorporated also in a conscious way, because at the end of the day, if another man flirts with your woman, for instance, or hits on her and it's really disrespectful, I mean, imagine for a moment, not in your example, but imagine someone else would say, well, that's okay, I'm just going with the flow. Let's just let it flow. And then everyone to their own. But that is not what I believe is right or would feel right to me in that moment. That's where I wouldn't say it's necessarily jealousy, but it's an honoring of that sacredness and protecting also that union and saying, hey, that's not okay, right?
Yeah, there's like an instinctual jealousy. I would consider it more like a territorial feeling of like, there is a guy that obviously doesn't respect maybe even the boundaries of my woman, or maybe he almost tries to like play with them. And then you obviously feel that feeling. But then there's obviously the more deeper, or I would say more interesting part of jealousy, that it's not like, I feel like the instinctual jealousy, to be honest, I think everybody feels it. It's almost like too deep in us to quote unquote transcend it. But the emotional jealousy, the self-worth part, that's something where I feel like it's really interesting, because you're working a lot also with couples and with men and with women. So I'm just curious, because you were talking about this like process of going to that fear of abandonment, the fear of loss. I know it's like a hard question, but could you try to like create like an image or like an idea of how a process for a couple looks to really like go through this together? Like what does this actually look like? What's the quote unquote transformational process or moment that has to happen in order to almost like integrate maybe those parts?
Yeah. So let's use an example. Let's say there's a couple and one has a really strong abandonment wound, and the other person has an avoidant attachment style, meaning they are someone who, the moment it gets very deep or it gets very vulnerable, in very generalistic terms, to stay kind of for the sake of this example, to make it to simplify it, they pull away. That level of intimacy feels like a threat to their nervous system or feels really uncomfortable. Okay, so we've got that couple, they're playing out kind of common avoidant, anxious dynamics. How does that process look like? Well, number one is that both have individual work to do. So both, first of all, need to recognize I am playing out a core wound in this process. Before both take full ownership, it can't just be one. Yes, one can create a powerful change, and that can have a powerful ripple effect, but it's not guaranteed. Much more powerful is when both choose and own this work fully. So let's use the example that one person has the abandonment wound. Most likely something that occurs is that they will find they will constantly reaffirm unconsciously the belief that they're being abandoned. Little moments micro moments turn into macro moments. This person might just leave me. This is the moment they're going to abandon me. Or this is the slow beginning of being abandoned. I lost my father due to cancer early in my life. I lost him slowly to the illness. What did it create? A deep abandonment wound. I had to work through this because the moment I felt the micro moment of abandonment, whether it was real or it wasn't real, that's irrelevant in this example. My mind would already go worst case scenario. I would go into a fight or flight or even a freeze state, my nervous system. And I'd be like, wow, this is the beginning. The next step is more abandonment. This is the beginning of them pulling away, which then makes it really difficult. But what happens there? Let's stay practical. The couple, one is now feeling abandoned. So now they get into their nervous system becomes hijacked by that wound. So what are they communicating to the other person? What they're communicating at a deeper level, our nervous system is always listening to the other person, and can pick up cues that we consciously necessarily are not aware of, or conceptually. The other person gets the message: I need to protect myself from this. This is dangerous, or I need to protect myself right now. And in that is a gradual pulling away. And in that pulling away, the person gets more affirmation that they're being abandoned. The other person feels like that whatever they do, it's not right, and feels like that they just can't get it right, and feels like it's too much. The other person is too needy. They don't feel that their space and energy is fully honored. And here, both need to look at what's happening in these moments. And this is really messy and intense work. But messy means it's vulnerable, it's imperfect, it's walking through the fire. So it's really looking at the person who feels abandoned in such a moment to be able to not get rid of that, because that's a journey, but to still somewhat stay conscious and perhaps even express to the other, right now I've got a deep fear that you're going to abandon me. And you can most likely feel it in this moment. This is attunement. Now the other person is not guessing or feeling, whoa, something is off, but I don't know what is off. Right? Because if we don't express it and then try to get an answer, it feels like manipulation. The other person feels like they're doing something, but they're not saying what's really going on.
Yeah.
So there are more elements to this, and I could talk 10 hours about this, but in the honor of this podcast, it would be really going into this specific moment. And then, for instance, one starting to break the pattern, and the other person, they might say, or they might agree to something such as, I will not abandon you in these moments. I'll stay with you in the fire.
Yes.
Right? I'm staying, like, not fixing or saving. Like you said before, saving people. In another context, you said it, but it's important, that savior energy. Just, I notice something is going on, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm just staying present with you here.
Yeah, beautifully.
Pattern interrupt, powerful shift. These two people experience an embodied shift. Something changes. That old story that keeps returning, a new reality. It's almost like a quantum leap happened in that moment.
Yeah, it's really important for me to highlight what you just said on the prescriptive level, because over the past year, I would say I talked with therapists, trauma therapists, couples, and also different people from different fields. And what starts to become more and more clear for me is that it's not some sort of like hypnotherapy you do for yourself, or some sort of like psychedelic ayahuasca journey, or like cathartic experience that will eventually like change the way you feel about jealousy. But it's actually this like consistent communication in relationship, that you cannot really go through this just by yourself, that you actually need to go through this together. And you're just another one of the people who now brings that up in a sense. So I think that's really important to highlight here, because so many people are obviously searching for the solution. What could be the next thing I could try? What could be the next tool? Maybe as a little question to end this one, you are basically offering quote unquote coaching and advice to people. There's also the classic relationship therapy advice, or like people who just go through therapy very classically, solo and individually and then together. But would you say it is realistic for a couple to learn those tools themselves through video courses or through like online classes, and then, or through a book, and then apply them together as a couple to go through this? Or do you feel there will always is a big word, but would you say it still makes sense for most people to have quote unquote like a neutral person in between? Because this is where I still feel some people say, hey, you can actually, if you're aware enough, if you're conscious enough, you can like solve everything just you and together. But then there's this other dozen of people I talked with, they say like, if you think you can just do it alone, you're always delusional. There's always room for a good therapist. So I'm just curious about your own personal opinion here.
We need to be radically honest here. Not everyone always needs a deep dive, 12-month, 3 years, 5 years, intense journey where they walk through the fire with another person. Can it be helpful to everyone? Absolutely. Does everyone absolutely require this? Otherwise, they're eternally lost and will keep kind of falling through or drifting through life and never get to where they want to be? No. There are people who in these moments find this information, whether it's through a book, a video course, a program, anything I offer, anything someone else offers, and then they are at a level of consciousness, their nervous system feels safe enough to apply that. Let's use an example, to speak one's truth. Like I always talk about speaking your truth. But in a relationship, when you're afraid of being abandoned when you speak your truth, many people struggle with that because that's the moment where it's like, okay, but that doesn't feel natural because I might lose connection if I really stand in my highest truth here. So not everyone through a video course, a podcast, will feel that they're genuinely ready to step into that energy. And that's not weakness. That's not to put the blame and think like, you didn't do enough work. Because some people say it's about courage. Yes, it's about courage. But some people go through really hard things. I help so many people go through the fire, and sitting in that fire, sitting in that medicine is so intense. And I will honestly say the level of empathy and the compassion, I always was very empathetic and compassionate. But when you really see someone struggling at such a profound level, they want to change, but it's so deep, it hijacks them. And they feel this shame, and you walk through them through this journey. It humbles you. It makes you realize this is not easy, right? So it can always be helpful. For some people, it is definitely, I'd say, at some point, the requirement to truly create embodied shift. What I would say, though, is that we need to be very aware of specific differences in approaches. I'm a coach, so my focus is laser focused deep coaching. I don't want to do a 20-year-old journey. I don't want to speak every week about what happened last week and tell me everything about your childhood. For me, it's more about, let's go into the fire. Let's focus on the root cause, what is really happening, and let me help you get there in the fastest way possible while still integrating and, of course, feeling safe in this process. So there are differences in approaches as well. And I believe it's so important to be very aware of the somatic element of all of this. Because if we're just talking through things, that can be very helpful. But we need something deeper. We need a shift. Call it a bodily shift. Call it an energetic shift. An experience where both go, wow, this is different. This can actually work. I can feel my power here. If this stays conceptually and just here, I should be doing this and I know all the information, it doesn't go anywhere. So it's helpful for everyone. For some people, it's definitely a requirement at some point in their journey. And some people manage it because they generally have done so much work that their nervous system feels safe enough to apply things. And of course, we also need to look at what approaches are most powerful.
Yeah, man, that's a very good answer. It gives definitely a lot of perspectives to anybody individually. Like you can ask yourself and just assess a little bit where you are. I mean, it all starts obviously with the content you're doing on Instagram, which in my opinion is a really cool, from a creator to a creator, it's a cool strategy. Like the way you talk with your audience, it's very, like I said, it's confrontational in a sense. And I like it. So I have a a personal question now, as somebody who talks not just to men, but also to women. And I usually feel personally that this is still a resistance I have sometimes, is like as a man giving advice to women. It feels like a challenge for me personally. And there's always, under the comment section, when I talk about it, there's it's always like it can get received from men in a way where like, hey, why do you talk about this? Or women can say like, oh yeah, I really feel seen. But even in your comment section, sometimes I see like the women who comment, but where are those men you're talking about? It's like this. So I'm just curious, how do you balance your content around this topic so you feel like you do justice to both genders?
It's a fantastic question, Misha. I value that question. It's about being crystal clear what I can help with. If I were to say I am the person to help a woman with her hormonal cycle, no, absolutely not. That's not I could really at a deep level help a woman with, because I am not a woman. I don't have that experience. I don't know how that feels, these changes. I don't know how to honor the cycle. I'm not in tune. Yes, I'm in attunement with my wife and I can understand at the deepest level, but I've got a different experience in my own body. So for me, what I really focus on is specifically helping women in relationship with men. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One aspect is helping women understand men at a deeper level. Another aspect is the element of putting words to the challenging experience that the feminine is going through. When a man is truly attuned, that has a healing effect on the women who are ready to receive that. Not that I'm a healer in that sense, but for a woman to see there are men out there who are in that, who have that level of attunement, who have gone through this journey. No one is a saint, but have gone through this journey and continue to be on this journey. No one is ever complete. It's about also validating that pain and allowing women to feel truly seen. Hey, what you're going through and what you're experiencing, that is something real, because part of what has happened in this world and this society is that women have been suppressed. The divine feminine has been suppressed. Too crazy, too intense, too difficult. Why does she always make a big deal out of everything? And we as men, even the conscious ones, quote unquote conscious one, we often still play out that paradigm unconsciously by trying to fix her, by trying to change her. So for women to see there is another way, and what you're experiencing is not just valid, but there is a deeper intuitive knowing inside you that this is not in highest alignment, that there is a deeper and more profound way. That is the journey of the return of the divine feminine. I'm doing my humble work to be of service on that path as a man, but I'm very clear about what I can masterfully help people with and what is not my domain. And what is not my domain, I'm not going to focus on, and I will never say I can help people work through.
Yeah, it's definitely very humbling because I just looked a little bit at your stuff, and I could guesstimate now your demographics, but I'm not sure. But there's a lot more women in your comment section than men usually, and for me it's the opposite. I would say I have like 75-80% men and 20% women. And what I think is so interesting is, for me, is this question when I talk about the standard I have as a man for myself and the standard I have for the woman in my life. Sometimes I'm asking myself if I'm creating some sort of like a outrageous standard, especially for women, because like I said, this comment somehow started to like when I see that comment of women, and this is like so classic, like where are those men you're talking about? I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm just curious. Are those women who ask that question even on the level where they can attract a man like that, or are they maybe somehow maybe also a little bit like like almost like sold a story to say that the men out there are not there. I don't see those men, but usually in my life in the moment I attracted the woman that actually fitted me is when I actually transformed to that level and not before. So I'm just curious, how do you balance that out, where you say like, okay, I want to basically create that standard, but I also want to be realistic enough, and also just almost like communicate from a place of, you can say integrity even, maybe self, almost for me it's almost like this like self-critic idea of like, how do I serve, like the first question you had, how do we serve the people here the most? And I'm just curious about your perspective on that.
Yeah, you speak to something important here, that unrealistic standard, right? So let's use an example. Let's say a woman with a strong father wound, right? So there's a strong father wound. All men are bad. Men cannot hold me. Men cannot be trusted. And now comes a man here who speaks about the divine masculine, who speaks about men stepping in their power, being in highest integrity, holding space for the feminine. And it seems like, wow, there might be this idea out there for me, this man who is the polar opposite of what my father was and all these other men who hurt me. And if I can just find this perfect man, then and only then can I truly feel safe. And then I'm going to give my all and offer my heart to the world, right? So this is something we have to be very mindful of. And what a lot of people don't know is, in my women's container, I am just as brutally honest as in my men's container. The women who go through my containers, they know I'm not sugarcoating. I am telling them literally, when it's through the lens of a father wound, or when it's a group coaching or even a one-on-one session, there is no place for sugarcoating. There is no place for casting an ideal of the perfect man. That man doesn't exist. Every man who breathes and goes to the toilet still has work to do, right? That's a fundamental fact. Men sometimes will not be present. Sometimes we will be challenged. It's not about that. What I'm always talking about is a man who is willing to show up and to return to his center when he has lost himself for a moment. A man who is willing to return to love, not a man who is perfectly rooted in love all the time. And the key here for women is to work through their wounding as well. Because when a woman has that father wound, she will always look at men through the lens of the father wound. This man has one trait that's similar to my father. It might be for a different reason. He's bad, run away, closure. He's not the divine masculine. That is operating from wounding. There's no place to see a man in his full beauty, in his fullness. So women and men, we both have foundational work to do here. And you are right. Women who ask the question, well, but where are all the conscious men? In my country, they don't exist. In Germany, they don't exist. Austria, Spain, France, US, they don't exist. And I say, no. I've worked with men from these countries and they do exist, right?
Yeah. It's like I said, for me, there is, you talked about the wounding, and I can also say from my containers, mostly with men so far, that it's also the evolutionary biology that we have to be compassionate about, like, for me, it's really hard to talk about this topic with men without talking about at least some sort of like hypergamy, like the idea that women are somehow mating upwards, and that there is definitely some sort of like responsibility for men that we first have to almost like acknowledge and start to say, like, we want to not just be loved unconditionally. We want to be loved for what we can do for women. And that's where I want to like somehow like excel. And that's where I feel like there's like one of your posts. I read a lot of your posts in preparation to this podcast. So one of your posts that I felt was really interesting, because I'm not sure if I can fully agree on it yet, is that you said that the conscious relationship is not transactional. And I would just be curious, how do you teach this topic, especially to men, without talking about hypergamy, for example? Because there is, for me personally, this like idea that there is some sort of like, there has to be something a man has to do in order to be chosen by the woman, at least for me at this point.
Yeah. Many elements, many things to go into here. Let's start with the transactional piece. We all have basic needs. That's why I remember I put in the caption in there, this is not about abandoning our basic human needs. So if someone reads that and goes, you transcend to a state of consciousness where you no longer need anything. You are just floating in divine, abundant, enlightened bliss. And if you need anything, it means you're still not enlightened. That's called spiritual bypassing. No one has reached that state. And the one talking about that state is projecting an enlightened persona of invincibility while they're actually guarding a deeper pain and a deeper vulnerability and fragility of what it means to be human, because certain pain is unavoidable with being human. And true consciousness and awakening for me means walking through that with an open heart and with humbleness. However, to stay focused here, the transactional piece is not about abandoning our basic human needs. It's about two people deciding that this is not a relationship where I'll give you this and I want this in return back. And if you don't give me that in return back, then I'm going to punish you with my withdrawal. Because so many people play this out. This kind of what's called covert contracts. This doesn't mean covert narcissist, by the way. It's called covert contracts because covert narcissists often play this out, but I'm not talking about someone who is a narcissist and plays this out. I'm talking about someone who is not aware that they have these unspoken expectations. And when they're not met, shut down, withdrawal, how dare you don't read my mind and meet my needs if I haven't done the work to actually express them fully. And that's a very limited state of consciousness to relate to another person. A much more powerful way is to say, hey, I'm looking for someone who is a giver, who is not afraid to open their heart and truly pour into the relationship, because that's who I am. And let's both be givers. Let's both be in service to love. Let's not have a scoreboard. You did this, I did this. Let's both give so much in abundance, in love, in safety, in everything, that no one ever feels left behind and unseen. That is what this post specifically talked about. Now, you also said something else here about the man having to do something, right? You asked me about that as well. And this is true. So at an ideal level, if we say, it's not about what you do, it's just about who you are, just be present, and that's it, that can quickly become a floating around and drifting around in space. There is an element of conscious action and conscious effort. When I speak of that, what I'm referring to is that to not attach our worth as men to the value we provide, but to have our worth rooted in the deep heart, soul, integrity, and who we are being as a man. Because that way, that approach allows us to show up with so much more fullness, with so much more heart, and so much more presence. And yes, there are still things and conscious effort that has to be done. A man must put effort in to show that he fully chooses a woman, that he wants to be with her, that he is willing to show up in difficult moments. Conscious effort, there's a balance between the two. It's only when we as men for so long we have identified ourselves through the value we provide, fixer, savior, any of those, provider, protector. These things are beautiful. Not the savior and fixer, but protector and provider, beautiful. But we are more than that. We're not just the value we provide. We're something deeper.
Yeah, it's. I definitely agree. And on the same time, like I said, this is where I sometimes feel, just by observation, that if a woman creates a too high of a standard because she has this, like, maybe not even fully aware of itself, like this idea of like wanting to mate upwards in the marketplace, and then on top of that she has all those new spiritual expectations, then all of a sudden maybe she's waiting for the man and he's not coming because there's almost like too many things she's now like filtering out. And on the other hand, I see men that are using these beautiful teachings that you and other teachers are providing and ignore the fact that there's still a provider role to almost like fulfill, like, and this is where I'm still like trying to figure out my own style of teaching it, So, because you said something about expectations, there's one of my favorite quotes. It's called unspoken expectations are premeditated disappointments.
I know this quote, it's a powerful quote.
Yeah, it's so good. And this is what I mean. Like, I feel like if we're not talking about those social contracts, those invisible social contracts, if we don't make them visible and also go dig deeper into the taboos, then we are basically not really touching that part. And I'm glad that you're seeing the both sides of it.
Absolutely. Women, also one of the most important things for women is to when I speak of the divine feminine, I just want to make that crystal clear, specifically for the men listening here. When I speak of the divine feminine, I'm speaking of a woman who comes from love. She doesn't come from criticism or you are not yet that ideal that I need you to be for me to finally say, now I feel safe, now I give you what you want. Because that moment will never come. Because what it creates is this wounded dynamic. You're still not enough. You're still not enough. You still got to show up more. Oh, yesterday you weren't present. So now I'm going to withdraw. That is not the embodiment of the fullness of the divine feminine. The divine feminine has this ability to look at us men with love. I see you for who you are, and I love you for who you are in this moment. Even with your imperfections, you're beautiful. And from love, I'm going to call you to a higher standard. Not because I need that standard to feel a certain way, not because I'm projecting my daddy wounds onto you, but because I know how powerful you are as a man. I see you, and because I see you, I will never, quote unquote, let you get away with losing yourself, because I know how powerful you are. But as I'm speaking of this, I hope everyone can feel the difference. This is care. This is love. I care more about someone's growth than someone else. It's like, it's love at such a deep level. But not every woman embodies this. Not every woman has come to this place where she can say, this is how I feel. And until that is embodied to a certain degree or to the fullest degree, there is exactly space for what you described, of that unrealistic standard that will make men always feel not good enough.
Yeah, I think it requires a woman that also has like really built the trust in herself, because then, and that's something I've experienced, and I've talked with this with somebody else on this podcast, is that as soon as a woman goes through that shadow work or through those processes, she becomes less hypergamous. So it's almost like this programming that in certain countries, it's actually crazy. In Russia, there's like the school of femininity, for example, where women are getting trained to get the highest status male they can get. It's almost like they learn the persuasion and all the different buttons to press, And if you know that, then you know like that's a crazy fucking world to be in Russia. Like I don't want to be a guy in Russia. But let's circle to another really interesting thing you said, that I would love to have your personal story or your personal perspective on. Because it's hard for me. Like you have a very poetic way of like writing, and my way of like imagining is always images and scenes. So you say something about the leadership of a woman, because obviously, as we know in this paradigm, the man is like the leader, and you call it like the outside leadership. It belongs to the man, while in truth, the feminine leads just as much as the masculine, but in the internal sense, in a more mystical way, in a spiritual realm. Can you elaborate on this from your own relationship? I would just be super curious about
that. I can see, because I do write in a very poetic way. And for those who need a kind of more logical approach to this, I can see how this sentence specifically might sound intriguing, but at the same time doesn't really give a clear image of what does this actually look like. So let's make it practical. And I can definitely, in my own marriage, this is embodied so beautifully. My wife will often know before me when I'm disconnected. Not because I'm totally out of touch with myself and never know, but she's so attuned. We can call this the energetic field of connection. the energetic field of union. But let's stay with the word connection, because union is more poetic in that sense. Connection. Every person, even when they have never done any spiritual work, they know whether they feel connected to someone or not. It's this invisible force that's always there. No one can put their hand around it. No one can say, here it is not. But we can all feel this invisible, permeating force that impacts us all at the highest degree. And the feminine, the deeper she goes in her journey, tends to be so rooted in being able to feel any energetic shift, even a slight shift. Let's use an example. A man with a woman in the restaurant. There is a waitress. The waitress smiles at the man. And in that smile is a slight seductive smile, right? It's not like unbelievably, she doesn't hit on him in an incredible way, but there is something there. And now the man loses presence, not completely. He doesn't stare at her and loses himself completely and blatantly, obviously disrespects completely the woman he's with in the restaurant. But he starts to drift a little bit away. He's no longer fully present. He's glancing here and there. He's looking away. The feminine can feel that shit. And when I say shit, I'm bringing humor in. It's not shit in that sense. It's a big challenge for many men, right? And she can feel that. That's the attunement of being able. And that's what I mean. The feminine leads, not leadership in saying, you right now are doing this, not instructing us men or saying, you now need to work with your sexual energy and do this. No, that's not magnetic. That's not creating intimacy. That kills intimacy, in fact. But through her response to that, because how is she going to feel? She won't feel fully safe or fully met. There will be an element of, maybe not a total shutdown, but an element of this doesn't fully feel safe in that moment. Because here is a man who's totally losing presence and focus when there is another woman who smiles at him, right? And I'm not even talking about the kind of element of, can a man do this? Is this allowed? Is it not allowed? That's a whole different conversation, right? I'm talking about the element of losing oneself in that, even if it's just a brief moment. And the feminine leads by making us aware. She is that mirror that will tell us in 5 seconds, hey, you lost presence. Hey, you're disconnected. Hey, this and this happened. She expresses it not through verbal language usually, sometimes, depending on the context, but more through her body, more through her heart. And that's what I mean by attunement. When we're attuned, we can sense it. We can feel it. You know, every man knows this feeling, something is wrong. Something is not right. It's like, fuck, somewhere here, on this day, on this dinner date, something happened. Something happened that changed the energy of it. So the feminine leads through always being that mirror of where is the connection. And the invitation is, can we drop into a deeper level of connection? Can we go deeper? That's what I mean in the spiritual realm. It's more spiritual depth. The feminine is this calling for how much deeper can we go at a spiritual level?
Yeah, it's. I always tell my girlfriend that I'm so happy that she's the one where I feel like she's calling me in rather than calling me out, because that's
I like
the difference.
that. It's a good distinction.
Yeah, and it's funny because my girlfriend also is pretty attracted to women. So what is so funny with her in the dynamic that when I see a girl from afar that looks good, she always sees her before me already, and then we look at each other and we're like, oh yeah, you saw her too. That's always funny. I have another one. That's actually where I started to talk with my girlfriend about your content, where you write about the feminine communicating through subtleties.
Yeah.
And she and me we're talking about this a little bit because obviously, like you just said, you don't want a woman that gives you instructions, right? But where we are like trying to like find our own perfect flow or perfect middle ground is where she sometimes says she would love me to feel more the subtleties of her communication. And for me, it's not that I want this form of like instruction, but I somehow say it would be so nice if you could, like, from a vulnerable place, speak also from your deepest desire.
Yeah.
So the question we wrote down together is like, yeah, where do those two parties meet, basically?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
There are many ways to go into this, but let's talk about attunement, right? Maybe what she's asking for is an even deeper level of attunement. Not that now you're not attuned, but an even deeper level of attunement, because maybe she knows that absolutely that's something that's possible, right? An even deeper way of relating. And if she were to express that really clearly, even if it's vulnerable, I hear what you're saying, not through instructing, I need to do this, or from a vulnerable place, it's almost like taking away the edge of the growth, you see? Because the growth has to be an embodied realization, not conceptual understanding. So if I tell you right now, or if she tells you this is what she wants, it might be helpful. But if we don't have that experience in that moment of insight, wow, this is what she desires. I can feel what she means. We feel it at a deeper level. It's almost like she might be asking, I don't know the exact context, but she might be asking, feel me from your heart. Don't try to understand me from your mind. And the request, can you express it vulnerably, while a beautiful request might still be, can you make this more understandable for me in my mind? Rather than truly rooting in my heart and letting go of trying to figure it out, finding an answer, but attuning truly in this moment.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. I think without knowing what she will say, I think you just brought it home in a nice way, because it is an interesting dynamic, because certain women I've dated in the past, they keep quiet, they don't do anything. But then eventually she maybe takes initiative and goes around the vulnerability herself to create the reaction she wants from me. And then I catch that and I say like, no, this doesn't feel like what is it really, So then, like you said, I'm probably invited to even see that and not trying to like contextualize it or like mentalize it and almost like acknowledge it as like this. Oh, that's okay. There is something here, and rather than even like asking for more vulnerability, I could just like, try to like be more aware of it, right?
And there is also the element of discomfort. I think this will apply less because we've just spoken to this, but for all men here, when a woman expresses something like that, there might be a discomfort of not fully knowing, wanting to figure it out. But the figuring out in this context occurs at a deeper level. It's not a let me find an answer, fix this and find a solution, apply that framework every single time, which then leads A plus B is C. That might work in a business. That might work in different scenarios. But here, it's not about a solution. It's about spiritual evolution, right? So we're not looking for a solution. We're looking for spiritual evolution, which beautifully rhymes. I didn't realize until now. And that evolution is a stretch. There is a sense of, okay, let me get present. I don't fully understand what it is, but let me get present. And maybe there's even an element of discomfort when we as men don't know fully. We want to know, we want to fix, we want to change. Who are we when we don't know? And can we still stay in the fire? Can we stay in the discomfort? And there is a power in that. It's difficult to put words to this, but there is a deep power in that.
Yeah, sitting with the unknowing. Yeah, it's the only thing I can say is that something happened in the last 1 or 2 years where my sexual system, or like my body, or let's just say my cock, responds only to full 100% authentic happening. And if there's anything that is like blocking that, then I can feel that. But now when you say the way you just said it, rather than like looking of what's not authentic in front of me, I could also just like ask myself, is there maybe something I don't fully understand, or is there maybe a grasping of I want it to making sense, and therefore also something that blocks me, rather than looking outward. So that's what I'm taking away from here, because like I said, I just feel like my creative force, the way my life now feels, is like there's no misunderstandings anymore if I follow the flow of that feeling, like the feeling of life flowing through me, and that there's a direction that feels always aligned, and therefore I can only have sex when that feels aligned. And if it doesn't feel aligned, then I know there is manipulation either on my side or on the other side to create something that isn't fully, like you said, truth, right? Like truthful.
It's the same for me. Absolutely. Yeah. And the deeper I went on this journey, the more this sensitivity developed. This kind of making love when you're disconnected, that reality doesn't exist for me anymore. No. Because the connection is there. And before it wasn't there. Sex was a numbing thing. Sex was, whatever it was, it definitely wasn't something conscious, something that came from a deeper place. It wasn't real intimacy. And that increase in sensitivity is actually, some men unconsciously believe that's weakness. I even had a client who said to me, sometimes I wish I'd be less sensitive. He said to me, I wish I wouldn't find sex something so sacred. I wish I'd be like other men who don't find this so sacred and important. And what I said to him was something along the lines, and I coached him on this, is that his sensitivity is actually wisdom with the right person, right? Mm-hmm. That sensitivity is power because you're attuned. Everything is interconnected. When one makes love from total disconnect, it means there is a total disconnect at some level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly like that. And I think this is something that's what my teacher told me 2 or 3 years ago. He said, Misha, if you go through that path, maybe you know him, Justin Pierce. He said, if you go through that path, you will eventually end up having more availability for women than ever before, and you will have the better sex skills than ever before. But on the same time, you will not actually want it anymore, like all that availability, because it becomes more and more focused on truth. And that's definitely something I can agree on. Maybe also to bring it back to the woman again, because we just talked about the awakening in us and how that leads to our sexual discernment and the different taste. The discernment I always make, is this a connection fuck or a distraction fuck? That's basically what it is, right? How do you see it with the awakened woman? What are the attributes for an awakened woman? Because it is a label, and obviously there is like some sort of like a spectrum for both. The same way I don't know if I'm an awakened man, like I definitely feel the quality of sensitivity, but there is still something there where I can say like I still see, or I still remember all those like dark moments, and when I think back about them, I'm still like, oh, they're kind of hot, like I don't feel like, oh, I'm now holier than this. So maybe for a woman, what are the attributes you see in women that maybe through your coaching, through your process, start to ripen? Like, what is changing in a woman that becomes awakened?
One thing, and maybe the most important thing, is that a woman, this ties into what we said before, is no longer looking for that perfect man and safety to choose love. No, she chooses and embodies love regardless. Light shines not because of how others respond. Light shines regardless of anything, essentially. And It's when a woman makes this choice, and I see this so beautifully embodied in my wife. When I first met my wife, at first, apart from her incredible beauty on a physical level, I could literally feel the love. I could feel this energy of love expanding from her. And it both terrified my ego in a good way, because I realized I had to rise to something greater to meet her fully. But even more importantly, it allowed me to also drop into a deeper level of love. In her presence, I felt myself, and I felt the world in a different way. And I even said to her, there is something about you. You're glowing. What is going on there? There's so much light coming from you. And it's not that she didn't have challenges in her life. It's not that she's not working through her things like I'm working through my things, like we're all working through things. But it's that regardless of, not waiting for a man, not waiting for something, but she is love. Or if in a moment something happens, she returns to love, and she embodies that so beautifully. So in my marriage, I feel more loved from her than by anyone else ever. And at the same time, I feel invited to rise into my highest power. And it's that beautiful balance, like you said, a calling in, I like that, not a calling out, right? It's a mix of, wow, I'm so accepted and seen, I'm whole, and also the invitation to rise. And it's the choice when a woman says, I give myself permission to become that, to embody love fully. And that's when her energy field changes. That's when she sees men in a different way. When she no longer says, where are all the conscious men? They're all bastards. No, she says, wow, I just seen a man on the street who opened the door for a woman, or this older couple. That was so beautiful. She's able to witness that. And she wants to see the rise of the masculine as well. There is no punishment, or I punish you unconsciously for the pain you caused me, but more a sense of, wow, I love seeing you rise. And that is definitely, I would say, that the most embodied quality, or the quality that I can make most practical. And one other element here that is very important is also when a woman truly awakens, she becomes so rooted in that love that I just described, that love becomes her compass. And the other quality is the quality of that she becomes rooted in that love that I just described, and she will choose that love always, even at the expense of losing the man she loves at the deepest level. And this might sound a little bit paradoxical, because we men, our ego likes it. Oh, she'll never go. She'll never leave us. But actually, deep down, we want someone who stays for truth and love, and not someone who stays because they have father wounds, or because they're afraid to lose connection, or because they're afraid to be lonely. And if we're truly dropped in, we can feel that. And let's be honest, any man who had an experience of being with a woman who only stayed with him because she was afraid of being alone or losing the connection, but truly wasn't in highest alignment for her, it's not something any man feels proud of. It's not something where any man goes, wow, what a container. I feel so expansive. It's challenging, but at the same time, it's truth. And it talks about what you said before, about what your teacher told you, which is powerful, by the way, around that truth element.
Yeah, there is something that just comes up when you talk about this, almost like a purification process. Like sometimes I see men, they say like, oh yeah, I'm celibate for 3 months now because this is what I have to do in order to finally come to that level where I attract this woman. Or for me, it was actually not being in a relationship after my breakup. I was engaged for a year and was in a 5-year relationship with her. It took me 2 or 3 years to really open up again. Like for me, it was to really be with myself. And I feel with women, interestingly enough, maybe also because of, again, this like deep-rooted insecurity that is there for women. It's harder for women to do that. Women jump ships, quote unquote, way easier and faster after a relationship than men, or like they move on faster than men. That's something I've experienced and saw. And I'm not sure if there is, because right now we talked so much about all the different shadow work parts and the quote unquote therapy and all these modalities you can do. So I'm not sure if there is something you have to go through as a man or as a woman, like a rite of passage to finally be purified enough. Like, what do you think about those ideas of like celibacy or like staying with yourself for quite a while? Because in my experience, some women, when they're like single for 2 years and they don't date men, they get also like quite a hardened and almost in a different energy. So I don't have like a prescription here or like a real opinion.
What you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and I believe there is a place for all these things, like stillness, getting to really meet ourselves, not a place of a rite of passage, not being in relationship. I spent several years just walking through nature, meditating, and not being in a committed relationship. And I needed that in my journey to have the level of commitment and devotion that I carry and have now. But to say I didn't need that, no. That was a rite of passage, a threshold, an initiation, as you just powerfully said, Misha. And the question becomes, are we running or are we really going into the pain? And the key here is we can also run into relationships. Because what you just talked about, the image I have, let's talk about images, is a woman who always is in relationship with a man. A woman who can never be alone, right? That could be a sign that there's also some fear leading this, right? Mm-hmm. So I believe we all eventually, to be fully ready for a conscious relationship, I don't want to generalize, but I have to go through a threshold, have to go through a rite of passage where we are faced, we have no one to help us, no one to save us, no one to hold space except ourselves. I remember these times like being in nature, training or doing some calisthenics in nature, feeling nature, walking, breath work, going really deep. These were initiatory moments for me. I had to experience that. Mm-hmm. I needed these moments to become or to have the level of devotion I have now. Because now I'm not saying, because if a man doesn't have that experience, he might always in the back of his mind in a committed relationship then go, can I actually be on my own? Mm-hmm. Can I face myself in that way? I'm not saying that has to be the way. And it doesn't mean a man has to break up, but it might mean he has to make space for that in his life, for that stillness.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, it's a very good input. I have some ending questions that are more personal. So you can if you want, you can answer them from a personal place. If not, you don't have to. But I'm super curious about that. So the first question is just about working with your partner versus being more of the provider versus both people have their own work life. What did you find in your own relationship as the most fruitful model?
What I will say here is that while I respect everyone's journey and what they're doing, to me personally, if my wife would pay the dinner bill when we're going out for dinner, it doesn't feel very powerful to me. That's just an honest truth. Mm-hmm. Like my wife flashing the credit card and paying, there is something inside me that sinks a little bit. So that's not an experience I necessarily want. But also I don't shame anyone if that's an agreement they have and if that feels right to them. So I understand that, for instance, men might be in a position right now, men listening to this, where they're still working on their deepest dream and purpose, and they're not in a financial position to actually provide fully for a woman. Does that mean these men are losers? Absolutely not. I'd say for these men, own it fully. Express where you are. I'm going towards my deepest purpose. This is where I am. And this is what I can bring. I can bring my presence. I can bring my courage. I can't fully provide at this moment, but it's my goal in the long run. This is who I am, and I own this, and this is where I'm at in this journey. This is magnetic. And then a woman can make a choice. And it's not uncommon that a woman will choose a man who is in the beginning of stepping in his purpose, and then he becomes financially abundant and can enable that reality for her. This is very common in the stories of great men who did great things. They had a woman by their side, not when they became successful, but they had a woman by their side when they had nothing, who believed in them. So there's that journey, right?
That's a beautiful one. It's definitely a beautiful one.
and it's a very important one because, listen, in all honesty, I can say with my whole heart, if I were to lose everything today, my wife would still be here. I know this at the deepest level, no doubt. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful feeling to know that, to know to be loved. At the same time, there is a beauty in the element of providing. There is something that just feels really powerful. But of course, providing can also become controlling. Some men who have the financial means unconsciously through their shadow then use it to control the other person. So I'd say a really powerful man doesn't say, give up everything you have, I pay for everything, from the sense of control, but he says, hey, I love providing for you, but if there is something you love doing or you want to do, then I will honor that at the highest level. And I believe every couple has to find their way and their dynamic, because polarity is not a one-size-fits-all. Polarity is when two people are operating and embodying their highest truth in that moment. And a man can still create polarity with a woman, even if he's not financially abundant right now, because he still has his presence, he still has his determination, but he needs to be clear about where he wants to go. There needs to be a sense of direction, right? So from a personal level, I love treating my wife to an amazing dinner, for instance. It feels natural. It feels right to me. But at the same time, I don't identify myself with that. And I know my wife will always be by my side, even if I were to lose everything in this instant.
Okay, so to maybe stay there, does that mean you are is your wife still working anything else, or is she, like, how do you basically feel the energetic exchange in your awareness? Or like, what is exactly, because this is a topic I just answered on my Q&A last week, and it was so interesting how many people wanted to know that question that I felt like it could be interesting to know other men talking about it more transparently.
In my own relationship, I am definitely the one who gets up early in the morning and goes straight into the grind, right? And I even say to my wife, I don't want an energy, or no, I don't say it like that. I say, I love for you to be able to be in your feminine. And if the feminine gets up at 6:30 in the morning, grinds hard all day long, it's going to be much more difficult for her to be in her feminine energy. So my wife and I, we do certain things together. In our work, we sometimes work together. We do things together. But it doesn't mean she's working as much as I do. It doesn't mean she's grinding at 6:30 in the morning, opening the laptop and starting to work, doing deep breath work, embodiment, and boom, and getting onto the mission. I am the one who is focused on the mission. I am the one who puts in that we can call grind. Maybe it's not the most conscious word. And my wife, she's brilliant in so many ways. So her input very often helps me. She has a huge influence in big decisions I make. She's amazing at so many things, and she helps me in so many ways. At the same time, we balance that out for her to be able to honor her feminine energy fully and to not push her into her masculine energy. And my wife, I believe, will never be the person who just completely ever stops working, because that's by nature something that deeply excites her. She can do that without going into her masculine and hardening and shutting down. It's something she naturally and deeply enjoys. So we have a very unique balance in that sense. But no, she's not pursuing a deep other work passion or something along those lines in our relationship, while I'm working on my purpose.
Okay. So she doesn't have like financial goals or like because that's where I
exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Good. Okay, next question. Are you a father?
No, I'm not a father.
Okay, good. Then I can't ask you that question. Then to the next one. When was the last time you changed your opinion or maybe even your conviction on a very important matter?
That's a deep question. Let me feel into that for a moment because I don't want to give a superficial answer. What comes through me right now might not fully answer this question, but I believe it ties into that question, and it is what I genuinely feel in these moments. Something that I noticed when I teach about this work is that to notice when my own ego becomes activated. So there were elements in this journey for me where I thought, wow, Lorin, you got it figured out. You really understand the feminine. You really nailed this down. And then I noticed slightly, ever so slightly, my ego becoming activated. And of course, my wife, in your terminology, called me in immediately and pointed that out or mirrored that to me. And that was a really powerful moment where I realized, wow, there is an element where no matter how much work we do, it's so easy to get carried away when people experience the most profound transformations in my containers, my clients. The spiritual ego can come and say, wow, you got it figured out, right? And it humbled me. It humbled me. And that humbleness made me realize what it changed my opinion on is the realization that humbleness is actually one of the most important and powerful traits a man can ever embody. Did I know about humbleness before? Yes. But conceptually, I knew about it. But at an embodied level, like deep down, no. I had to go through this to really understand, no, motherfucker, you have to be humble. That's when spirit works through you. That's when you access a higher consciousness. Lose the humbleness and you lose your soul to a degree.
Beautifully said. All right, we have maybe for one or more, two more questions. So this is a quick one. What do you do purely for fun that others, maybe even your wife, would consider a waste of time?
Yeah, that's an amazing question as well. What is something considered a waste of time?
You do it purely for fun. You do it purely for joy. Like it actually gives you so much, but the people around you would say, that sounds like a waste of time for me.
That's a very deep one. I need to think for 30. I need to feel into this for 30 seconds. Yeah. What's something I do purely for fun? It's not an incredibly deep answer, but I don't believe it's meant to be a deep answer. One thing I do just purely for fun is when we are in Spain by the sea, I love diving. Like diving, just dive, not a deep dive like with the whole gear, but I just love diving. And some people wonder, like, when you jump in, why do you dive so much? Like, they really see me with an intensity, always under the water, swimming, diving, and like trying to hold my breath as long as I can under the water. And it just feels so good. It's something I feel called to do. Like holding my breath, I've realized is something so beautiful. And I think it does look a little bit like, not maybe weird, but a bit too intense. Like, the level of intensity with how I approach. Like people go for a swim, right? But I don't go for a swim. I go for how long can I be under the water? It looks like I'm going through some kind of deep ritual while others are relaxing, leaning back when they do go for a swim. And I'm not doing that. So I think that will be one of those, or people might never said it to me, but maybe thought, you know what? I don't know what this guy is doing there, but it's interesting.
Nice one. I can imagine it somehow, like this, like hyper focus and like being super determined about diving. We're at 6:30. Do we have time for one last question?
One last, let's put it in.
Yeah, this is a really good question. Maybe even for you. I love this question. So under the acknowledgement that you don't know what you don't know, what ability or skill or field of knowledge could potentiate your work 10x right now?
Wow. These are indeed very deep questions. I never been asked such deep questions at the end of a podcast. What field?
Yeah, something that you don't know it exists, but it exists. And if you would just do that for the next week or month or maybe year, it would blow up everything else. It would make everything so much more potent and big and effective.
Yeah, actually, I have a good answer, I believe, to this. It would be around one thing I noticed in my own journey. I'm very extroverted. Talking for me is very easy. And what can happen when talking comes so easily is a practice I now have, a very rigorous practice actually, to be mindful before I speak. Because I can share a lot and say a lot. And they have the power to create a lot of beauty and transformation. But I've also witnessed that becoming a sword. And sometimes actually without me intending, causing pain for someone. Or even causing a moment of misunderstanding, right? So what would 10x, and I'm already doing that, but let's say I 10x and spend even more time on that, would be to so rigorously practice and learn from the people who can say more with speaking less. Tapping into that at the highest level, studying that, right? I believe that is an edge that I'm already working on, but it would 10x everything in my life. The ability to say even less and give every word that comes even more authority. I don't know if this ties most likely into many fields, but that is the most practical answer I can give here.
That's a good one. It's a good one. It's speaking even more from this like stream of wisdom that comes through whenever we feel really connected. And it has a lot to do with mindfulness from what I can say. Like when I look at teachers, spiritual teachers, sometimes how effortless it just speaks through them. It's not even them anymore. It's like a channel that opens and the nervous system is just fully equanimous and it just happens. And it's like, wow, wow, where the fuck is this coming from?
Exactly what you just said. That puts it perfectly into an image.
Yes, man. So thank you so much for the conversation, Lorin. It was very, very nice. And we'll look forward to see more of you.
Amazing. It was a deep honor to be in this sacred space with you, Misha.
Thank you.